So good evening, everyone, and you're welcome to this Teagasc webinar titled TB Update, Understanding the Recent Changes for Your Dairy Farm. My name's James Dunne, Teagasc Dairy Specialist, and I'll be hosting the session this evening. So thank you firstly for taking the time to join us. TB continues to be a major challenge for the sector, with herd incidence rising above 6% in 2024 and over 6,000 farms experiencing a breakdown. So it's clear that change is needed. Tonight's webinar will explain the new TB action plan, what's changing, and what it means in practical terms for herd management, animal movement, and biosecurity on dairy farms. I'm delighted to be joined by Damien Barrett, Head of the Ruminant Animal Health Programme in the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, and Joe Patton, Head of Dairy Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc. They will outline the key policy changes and focus on some of the farm implications for dairy farmers. You can submit questions at any time using the Q&A function on your screen, and we'll cover as many of these as possible at the end. So maybe if I'm to come to yourself, firstly, Joe, Teagasc are dealing with a large number of dairy farmers on a regular basis. Can you maybe comment on the need to have this discussion tonight?
Good evening, James, and hello to everyone online. Yeah, obviously a very pressing issue for a lot of farms out there. I think the trends over the last number of years have been not good from an animal health perspective and from a herd management perspective at all. So obviously with where DAFM have come through with an action plan, it's been very positive and proactive, I think. I suppose where we wanted to get tonight from a Teagasc point of view was to put some of those measures and some of those implications in front of farmers, because we have heard a lot over the last year or two, let's say, particularly through discussion groups when nobody wants to be talking about TB at discussion groups, but you can see in certain regions of the country it comes up quite a bit because of how impactful it is at farm level. And there has been a lot of discussion, maybe a lot of speculation as well as to what the changes are coming and why they're coming. Is there need for them? What's the whole logic and rationale behind them? So I think tonight should be useful to get people maybe up to speed onto where the differences are. And I suppose, look, particularly from a dairy farming perspective, the spring of the year is obviously when people get really, really busy. And it's a thing that really has, struck us over the last while speaking to farmers that, TB, most people think about TB as a movement question, maybe. What does it mean for the calves? What does it mean for their selling and buying of stock? What does it mean for the routine of testing, etc.? Thinking about it as much that way possibly as they are thinking about it as a disease, I suppose. And maybe we're delighted to have Damien on this evening to try and maybe bridge that gap a little bit. We hope to maybe tonight to go through the mechanics of what the changes are and then maybe bring that back then to the, you know, to the features of the disease itself
Mm,
as and what the rationale is behind that. So we hope to, we'll take questions and queries as we can. We're trying to keep them on the basis of what the implications are, maybe more so than individual cases, I suppose. But I think, look, the best thing to do maybe is get stuck in with Damien, get the changes up front, and then we'll see. But I think just to remember, I think that it's there are implications there in terms of herd management, but just a single point for me really to start with. We are dealing with a disease, and I think sometimes we forget maybe a little bit that TB is a disease. It's and it behaves very much as such. All of these changes are to tackle that disease and to try and get on top of it. So, look, I suppose the best thing maybe we let Damien go through the changes and go through the action plan maybe, and then we can come back with some more of the discussion in terms of the implications as we go along. So,
yeah,
okay.
absolutely. So Damien, we'll let you share your screen and give your presentation. And as I say, folks, we've a lot of people on here tonight, so there is an opportunity to ask questions, and we will get to as many of them as possible.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Teagasc for the opportunity to speak to so many farmers this evening on TB, and I'd like to thank each of you joining us this evening for taking the time to talk about this disease. Now, Joe has said that sometimes we forget that this is a disease. I think we also need to remember it's not only a disease, it's a contagious infectious disease that's primarily spread by nose to nose contact among cattle. So like we do need to start thinking about it rather than, as Joe said, what are the implications of it? How is it started? How does it spread? And avoiding that spread. Now, I just want to set the scene here in the first few slides, and this is the situation as of this Monday, where the herd incidence is at 5.68%. The number of reactors on the 12-month over the last 12 months is 37, just over 37,000. The number of herds restricted 5,700, and all of those, you'll see the green arrows are going down. They are down year on year. However, there remains a fly in the ointment in that the number of confirmed slaughterhouse cases, these are factory lesions in cattle coming from non-restricted herds, that is continuing to rise. Now, there are two views on that. One of those is that we're not detecting that there's disease going undetected. The other is that the other is that there's infection in the population that's working its way through the system. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. The next slide here shows the situation over the last 6 months, and there has been an improvement in the last 6 months. But as we'll see that the number of reactors has gone from over the 12-month year to year average has gone from about 42,500 to around this 37,000, and the herd incidence has fallen from 6.27 to 5.68. But if we just look on where we've been, and like 5.68% is still way too high. That's a substantial increase on what we've seen in 2023, 2024. And really what happened in the second half of 2024, there was a surge, and we were living with the consequences of that surge, and it's coming back. But if we look at reactor numbers here since 2018, they peaked there in 2024. We came in around 42,000 reactors, 38,500 for 2025. But 38,500 is about double what it was in 2018, 2017, 2018, and this is a cause of concern for us. Like, while things have improved, they have a long way to go yet. And this next slide just it's a little bit out of date, but the trend continues. If anything, this trend is getting stronger, that we're seeing an increased proportion of reactors coming from dairy bred cattle, diminishing from suckler herd, and that's probably reflecting the demographics of our national cattle population. Now, this slide, I just want to go through it, and maybe this slide you saw an article, and some of you may have seen an article in today's Farming Independent that highlighted that it was a reduction in detections in 2022. I want you to go to the bottom of this slide first, and you'll see that the rate of factory lesions has essentially doubled between 2019 and 2024. So that's gone from 0.87 or so per thousand slaughtered to 1.62. That essentially means that the level of background TB in the population has doubled in that time. The detections, as you'll see from the top line in this slide, detections did not keep pace with this, and particularly so in 2022, when we saw that markedly the trend in detections went the wrong way. So what's this telling us is that, as I said, the background level of TB in the population has doubled. Skin test detections have not kept pace with that, and breakdown size has increased. And this is really telling us, or what's driving the current surge is that residual infection has assumed a greater importance as herd size has increased. We all know herd size has increased primarily as a result of the abolition of quotas, where we've more dairy herds, larger dairy herds, and these larger herds, to a large extent, were facilitated by increased cattle movements. Now, our residual infection model, this is work carried out by Miriam Casey and UCD, has shown that long-term residency and herd size are the two most significant factors for the occurrence of cattle-to-cattle transmission. And this really highlights the role of breeding cows. This is a piece of work from the University of Cambridge, a collaborator of our colleagues in UCD. And this study highlights a few things that we need to really take note of. The R0, which you'll be familiar with from COVID, our understanding of the R0 for TB was that it was about the order of 1.5. So that means that every infected animal infects 1.5 more. Now, this study from the UK would show that the R0 is indeed 1.5 in a herd of 30 cattle. But when the herd size increases to 400 cattle, that R0 becomes 4.9. So in effect, this means that every infected animal is infecting 5, which in turn is infecting 25, in turn is infecting 125. So as you'll see from that, if infection is not tackled early in a herd, if it's let rip, you're going to see very large breakdowns. The other thing here is that this highlighted, due to the imperfections of the skin test, that there's 21% of herds are harboring infection at de-restriction. Half of recurrent breakdowns are due to the presence of residual infection, and half of those breakdowns in this study were due to the presence of one animal being left behind. So this really highlights the importance of attention to detail in the annual herd test. And while it may be annoying, and it may be quite disruptive to trade or to calf rearing, etc. Being restricted for 1 or 2 animals is a hell of a lot better than seeing 50 or 60 animals going off as reactors. Now, I just want to highlight this piece of work carried out. We commissioned in the University of Wageningen. The University of Wageningen would be considered one of the best infectious disease modelers in Europe, and they also have particular expertise in wildlife. And they modeled a couple of different scenarios here. On the bottom here, you're looking at various wildlife interventions, going from no intervention up to 100% badger intervention and selective culling. And they looked at the test and removal, improved farm biosecurity, which essentially means the breaking of transmission between wildlife and cattle vaccination. They also looked at a variety of movement controls, from none to risk-based trading to pre-movement testing and to an outright movement ban. Now, for those of you looking on screen, the sweet spot here is where we can get the R0 less than 1 in green, and you'll see there that a combination of risk-based trading and pre-movement testing are the most, along with improved farm biosecurity and the wildlife interventions, are the sweet spot in terms of reducing the R0 less than 1. So faced with this background, will our current approach eradicate TB? The Chang paper, the University of Wageningen paper, clearly says it doesn't. And we're seeing that residual infection has assumed a greater importance in the epidemiology of TB. So this prompted us. We saw that our current approach wasn't going to be effective, especially so in the face of a surge. So the TB action plan, the minister got us to develop this action plan and addressing all aspects of the epidemiology of TB. And it's essentially a 5-point plan with 30 actions. They're the 5 actions, but we'll go through them. We'll go through them in a bit more detail. The first action here is support, or the first measure rather, is supporting herds free of TB to remain free. And the first here is encouraging people through simple, low-cost biosecurity measures to help the prevention of spread. And this will be shared with farmers. And this may seem pretty basic. It's pretty straightforward. It boils down to simple things like raising water troughs, raising feed troughs, fencing off sets to keep cattle back from grazing grass that's been contaminated by badger feces and urine. And the next one there is breeding for resistance. This is encouraging the support, the use of bulls with high resistance to TB, so that the animal, their progeny, will have a greater resistance to TB. The introduction of a pre-movement test. This pre-movement test will be for all dairy cows before moving into a new herd, and contract reared heifers before moving home. We'll be, if a contract rearer is sourcing animals from several herds, there will be a requirement for a pre-movement test into those contract rearing herds. Our post-movement testing option will be taken off the table. This option here will inform cattle purchase. Female breeding cattle of 18 months at the time of the removal of the last reactors will be flagged at the point of sale, allowing farmers to make informed choices when buying replacements. This applies only to animals over 18 months, female animals over 18 months at the time of the removal of the reactors. All other animals, this will not be applied to. The next here apply the collaboration. We are working closely with our colleagues in DAERA in Northern Ireland in jointly addressing this problem of this wicked problem of TB. Part of that would involve research. We're spending over €1 million per annum on research on TB, and this research is informing the development of our policies. We're also going to ensuring that the program is applied consistently across all regional veterinary offices. The next measure here is reducing the impact of wildlife on the spread of TB. We're moving in areas that are subject to vaccination. We are moving from blanket vaccination to test, vaccinate, remove, which means that we will be culling any badgers that are found to be infected with TB, and vaccinating those that are found to be free. We are just, our wildlife program is such that in where we're faced with high instances, we will carry out a localized response, and which involves more widespread culling even in vaccine areas if the need arises. We'll be providing a financial support package to farmers to improve on-farm biosecurity. Those measures I said earlier on, of say support around water troughs, raising water troughs, fencing offsets, that kind of thing. The deer management strategy has been in place since the end of 2023. There's been 15 deer management local deer management units established by the National Deer Program Manager in 2025, and there'll be more work going on in this in addressing the issue of deer. The next measure is the detection and elimination of infection as soon as possible in herds and avoiding future breakdowns. And the major change here is that gamma interferon blood testing for larger herds will be mandatory. That is for herds with breeding herds with 80 cows or more will require gamma testing if 5% of the exposed cohort, that's animals in the same management group, or 10 animals, whichever is the lesser, test positive at the skin test. We will be providing herd test results, the skin readings, to farmers with the view to identifying high-risk animals. For instance, inconclusive animals are known to be 12 times more likely to fail a future test. Animals with a bottom lump, a bovine lump, are known to be 4 times more likely to fail a future test. And we want to highlight those animals with the bottom lumps to farmers so that they may get them onto their cull lists and voluntarily remove them from their herds. Repeat H breakdown herds, so-called relapse herds. These herds will undergo, and just to clarify what a H breakdown is the disclosure of 3 or more standard reactors, 3 or more standard skin reactors at a breakdown. And where this occurs, where there's 3 or more standard reactors in a subsequent breakdown in the same epidemiological group, if we say that it was in the cow herd and animals that were comrades of those cows in a subsequent test go down, we will be putting in a testing regime for 3 years at 6 monthly intervals in those herds. That regime is currently 18 months. We're making quite an effort to ensure that that the testing carried out is of a high standard, and we've got a quality control system in place. We're following up on those, and we really want to ensure that the test is carried out to a high standard to maximize our chances of finding infection early. And the whole thing here is if we find infection earlier, we've got a better chance of eliminating it.
Damien, maybe just stop you there on that point in terms of that's measure three,
Yeah,
detect and eliminate infection ASAP and hard to avoid a future breakdown. Give us a little bit more there in terms of the rationale behind that. There's significant changes there in terms of to maybe what herds would experience at the moment and why those changes have come about and are built into measure three of the
yeah.
TB action plan.
Well, if you recall what I'm saying there from the residual infection model, this is really to address the issue of residual infection. And what we've found is that the sensitivity of the skin test diminishes as the size of the herd increases. And in that, we've been deploying the gamma interferon blood test to increase that sensitivity. Like the sensitivity of the skin test at best is about 80%. The sensitivity of the blood test is 90%. Basically, what's been happening is in the herds, in the larger herds, where we needed to increase the sensitivity more, we weren't seeing as much gamma interferon blood testing being carried out as we needed. And that's why this has been put in place, so that we're not going to leave a residue of infection in herds, that we're setting out to rid the herds of infection by increasing the sensitivity of the testing regime. So that's the rationale for um, the the mandatory gamma interferon blood testing in the larger herds.
One other question. You mentioned there residual infection and that term, what exactly, maybe for our listeners, what do you mean by residual infection?
Um, there are really three sources of infection for the spread of TB, or how TB gets into herds, or well, residual is there already, I suppose. But there's an animal is purchased in that's carrying infection that may well have passed a previous infection or previous test that may be introduced through wildlife, or the breakdown may occur as a result of residual infection. This is infection that was failed to be previously detected. And the reason for this is that there are a variety of reasons. First off, the skin test has got an 80% sensitivity. So what that means is that it detects 8 out of every 10 infected animals. So it'll it it has the potential to leave behind 2 infected animals out of every 10. And 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 that's just a reality of the test. Now, you may well ask why we use this test, but the upside of this test is that it has a specificity of 99.5%, which means that it produces about 1 in 5,000 false positives. And when you're testing 7 million cattle per annum, you need to ensure that you minimize the number of false positives. So that's why the skin test remains our best option as a screening test. The blood test then is an ancillary test, a supportive test that we deploy where in herds where we are quite certain there's cattle to cattle transmission. And that's our criteria for deploying it. And like the thing about as the what I said there earlier on about the R0 of 5 in larger herds, like residual infection assumes a greater relative importance in larger herds, because there are more susceptible animals there for it to spread to. So it really is important that infection is eliminated as soon as possible, because if it's not, it's going to fester as such and give rise to bigger breakdowns.
So I'm writing,
yeah.
sorry, Joe, yeah, come on ahead.
Sorry, James. Just I think it's a critically important point and very difficult one when we talk specificity, sensitivity. You always have to go back and check which one's which. But Damien, like we spoke to a lot of groups and we did a lot of sort of discussion with groups over the last couple of years on this and asking the question, and these are very rough figures. I would say that maybe, you know, 4 times as many farmers would say that they're more worried about false positives on the test than false negatives. I
Mhm.
think we surveyed only 8% of farmers that we talked to in groups mentioned false negatives as being a problem, right? whereas false positives, there's a very strong feeling among farmers, genuinely feeling among farmers that there's animals showing up on the skin test that don't have TB, particularly when that's followed, the old story of following that through to
Yeah.
factory lesions. So if you're saying here that the risk of residual infection is leaving infected animals undetected behind, that really links back then to the question about the question of false negatives, really, doesn't it?
Yeah,
If you
like
know what I'm saying, and
I'm
it's just to be aware. I think like we've had this argument a lot with people about, or discussion with people where there's a reactor or a couple of reactors and two, three reactors in a herd, and then you hear that it's people saying, well, they probably didn't have it, whereas there's not that many people talking about the ones that do have it that are left behind.
yeah.
Mm,
Um, I'm far more worried about false negatives than false positives because like they are there to seed further infection. And in terms of lesions, lesions are the end stage of TB infection.
Mm,
If you're detecting animals without without lesions, it means you're detecting them at an earlier stage. It means the disease hasn't become embedded as much in the herd. And say, for instance, if I said there, like if the specificity of 99.5% means that there's 1 in 5,000 false positives. If you have, say, 10 reactors and none of them have lesions, but the specificity of the test would suggest that 1 in 2.5 million of those are false. There's a 1 in 2.5 million that none of those have TB.
yeah.
Now, their odds I don't like playing.
Mm. So just
Like,
trying to keep this on the, in terms of the practical sense of it, that the mandatory blood tests, and we say gift tests, and we really talking about blood testing here, that it was a recommendation, it's now mandatory. So that I hear people saying a lot, and with very good justification very good justification maybe on their own previous experience, afraid to blood test because what it means is, take your typical situation, 100 cows for argument's sake, there's four, let's say there's five reactors, six reactors, seven reactors, something like that. Then you blood test, and there's another 12 go on the bloods, or another six go on the bloods. There's a genuine concern around that happening. But based on the odds you're talking about, that the bloods are there to pick up the residual infection, really, isn't it? And that's the logic behind it. Sorry, Damien, have we lost you?
the bloods are there really to address this issue of residual infection and get the sensitivity of the test
Up.
up in a hurt in a place or in a situation where it could be dropping. And um like the thing about this, if this boil is lanced now at early, it's going to continue and get worse. And you're talking there about ten reactors at this breakdown. You could have a subsequent reactor or subsequent breakdown with 30 or 40 reactors if it's not addressed. And like this boil needs to be lanced as early as possible.
Mm. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because that's a common thing, and it's catastrophic then when it
Yeah,
gets to that level.
it,
Yeah,
it,
that's what we're
it
trying to
is.
get. Yeah, yeah.
And lesions, while they may provide comfort in one sense, it means the disease is well and truly embedded in a herd, and it can be bloody hard to get it out of it.
Can we just ask maybe James before moving on, because I think we just deal with this and we'll leave it then maybe at that. But
Mm.
why is it, um, Damien, that some animals go undetected? Like, why are there certain animals then? You hear this, and it's again, I'm just thinking of some of the questions that we get coming through that, some people would say that there's certain animals nearly give up reacting to the
Yeah.
test. And is
Well,
that how do you know what's the story there? If you know what I'm saying. So
yeah,
you hear this a lot where there's a problem, no
yeah,
reaction to the skin test, and then suddenly they're killed and they come out in the factory with
and they're condemned.
condemned. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
What's
that
what's going
happens.
on? Yeah, what's
They,
going on there?
they, they're basically what we call allergic cattle, and they're animals that don't respond to the test. And the reason they don't respond to the test is that in bovis, Mycobacterium bovis, the bacterium that causes TB, causes immunosuppression, and it causes the animals not to react.
Mm.
And they're they're left there festering and spreading, and they may not, like the skin test. We've seen several cases where the skin test and the blood test, those animals don't go undetected. And some of my colleagues have done some fairly extensive detective work, going back over historic skin readings, like what I was explaining there, picking out animals that have had historic readings in the past and getting taking them out as reactors. And we found lesions in lots of those.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And just maybe it has come in on one of as a question, right? And I know we
There's a
don't want to
few
go into,
questions in there.
yeah,
Yep.
to not to go to another, not to, and just for anyone that's wondering, the questions and the implications around movement, folks, we'll get to that in a second, and we'll certainly deal with those, the questions of movement and potential changes on how pre and post movement testing and restrictions on that. That is coming in a second. But I think it's just important we deal with this question for a second. But just a question come in there around, a cow inconclusive after a breakdown, right? Are the chances that that inconclusive animal over time would be developed to be a reactor, or should that animal be blood tested? Or so it's the question of, these inconclusive animals, let's say,
yeah,
and this is after a breakdown situation, a smaller herd, let's say, that doesn't meet the need in terms of the numbers of cows there.
yeah,
So is there advice there just to blood test or to cull, because the risks are getting bigger then possibly?
yeah. An inconclusive animal is 12 times more likely to fail a future test than an animal that's passed a test.
12
So
times more
12
likely.
times, 12 times more likely. And that's why we're keen that these animals be removed promptly. Um, like the risk is too great, and especially an inconclusive after a previous breakdown is especially worrisome. So I think, like, I think people need to look at these and manage the risk. People are well used to managing other risks, and this is a risk that I think that they need to manage to avoid breakdowns in the future.
Okay.
There's a number of questions there, Joe, coming in around inconclusives, and there's maybe another one we might take now. What percentage of reactors actually have TB? Maybe when they're cultured as well as visible lesions. We hear a cow's not having TB when cultured, like it's the whole. You hear a lot of that, Damien.
Well,
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 the
well,
did
well,
or
well, to
didn't
be
have
honest,
TB.
if they have lesions, like, we don't go any further than that in most cases. That's enough.
Mm.
Um, like, we have there's only so much resources we have for culturing, and like, disclosure of a lesion, that's confirmation. But it's late confirmation. And I use that very technically, the word confirmation. That doesn't mean they don't have TB if they don't have lesions. They do have TB. It's an official test this is an official test that um one in 5,000 false positives. So I think people would want to, like, the the lesion is akin to the wound in the side and the nails in the hands. Um, it's like it's well and truly known at that stage. But um, the if they fail the test, people want to start realizing that they have TB, and stop arguing with it or challenging it, and rather trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
on that team, and we'll move on, maybe James. I know we can
Yeah.
circle back on some of these questions. I'll take a chance to maybe to put them in order, James, as maybe Damien moves on to the next bit. But just a query, in a similar vein, Damien, like the TB blood test will be positive if the animal has other infections going on. True or false? Is
Pause.
that
This is
false
this is a test. This is a test for TB.
for TB? Yeah. So it's a gift test. It's testing for the presence of TB.
Yeah.
And maybe just quickly on another one.
It's looking
Yeah,
it's very much along it's looking at the same cell mediated response to the skin test.
yeah.
It's for in both. It's specific for TB.
And just to go back on that, the chances of a the chance of a false positive is 1 in 5,000.
Yeah, on the
So,
skin test,
so
yes.
if you have three reactors or four reactors in a herd, the chances, or six reactors in a herd, something like that, the chances are 1 in a million that that's going to happen, or 1 in
Yeah.
2 million.
Well, I know if there's 10, it's 1 in 2.5 million.
Okay, okay. And then just quickly, and we'll move on then, maybe James.
Yeah.
We had 38 reactors, got them blood tested, and 24 were clear. How does that happen? Which is an interesting one, but that's just how we take that one, James. We
So
move
you're
on.
14 positive.
Yeah.
Now that's the specifics of that case I'm not aware of. That that would be there's usually a better correlation than that, but there are some reasons why we don't see that correlation from time to time around like timing of the test is one thing. Now I don't know what the case is here.
Okay.
But
And I know, look, it's difficult. I suppose the issue there is to dig into that on an individual basis. But
yeah,
you are saying, but in a situation like that, the point is that there's TB present on the herd.
yeah,
There's no point in arguing whether there is or isn't. It's there, it's in the herd, and then we have to think about finding if there is residual infection, using bloods to dig that out, and that's really what we're saying, isn't it? So
yeah.
yeah,
We might
sorry,
take
James.
one other question that's in there. Maybe go back to the significance of the increase in factory cases, and I suppose why has skin testing not kept pace? You've probably explained that, Damien, in the fact in your answers already, but like there was a big increase, obviously, in terms of detections in the factory, and there wasn't in terms of what was being
It
detected
has
at farm level.
it didn't keep pace, particularly in 2022.
Mm,
And that's something that's something that we're asking ourselves a lot of questions about, and we've got a couple of research projects looking at that in particular. But I think it's fair to say complacency set into the system at that stage. I think one of the it was kind of unfortunate that we had our lowest levels of TB as quotas were abolished. And there was a complacency, and let's face it, like there's a lot of complacency about TB until you have a breakdown, and um and people were probably not tuned into it, and as Joe said in his opening remarks, people didn't treat it as an infectious disease, and the bother is that when that complacency set in, and the disease in that environment of complacency took its chance and took off.
mm. I'm going to
James,
take one
yeah,
final one, Joe, and we will move.
we move, I think,
How
James,
how
because we're,
how
yeah.
how do we know if it's a residual infection from a previous outbreak or a new infection? Or is there a way
Um,
known, Damien?
well, firstly, the most likely way is if it's in the same cohort of animals. If it's say for instance in the cows, if say for instance you have a breakdown in 2022 and you have another breakdown in 2025, and cows that were present in 2022 are now reactors, that's more than likely residual.
Okay. Lovely. There's loads of questions coming in there, Damien, but we're gonna
Yeah, I'll
we're
sift
gonna
through that. I'll sift through
we're
them,
gonna
James.
move on.
We'll try and pull them into shape, right? So we'll let Damien move on. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll move on to measure 4, and this is helping farmers to improve all areas of on-farm biosecurity. And the first item here is we'll be providing advice. There's some of you may have availed of the TB Teagasc in the past. We'll be rolling these out. These are rolled out through private veterinary practitioners, and these provide specific advice to the farm. Now, we all, I think, I think it's fair to say that people's own vets rather than department vets are more know the herds, know the farms better, and they can provide tailored advice to the farms, biosecurity advice. So this is something that we're going to be rolling out more in future. And a lot of this advice may well be straightforward enough, but it's one of those things. Keeping it simple will be effective. Risk mitigation plans will be put in place for all H breakdowns, and this really the H breakdown is 3 or more standard reactors, and this is to develop specific biosecurity and purchasing actions to prevent future breakdowns. These again are farm specific and based on what are the risk factors in that breakdown. Now, the next item here is learning and knowledge transfer, and I suppose this evening is an example of it, where we're trying to speak to farmers directly through Teagasc discussion groups and webinars, like, whatever, in whatever way we can to get the message out there. And this is really, all these things here are about empowering farmers to see what the risk factors are and address them themselves. And taking as and I to be honest, I was delighted with the caption on the advertisement for this webinar. It's about taking back control, because like this is about taking control and taking on what you can do within the farm gate to prevent the disease within your own herd. The final thing here is addressing certain what could be perceived to be higher risk production systems, like controlled finishing units, dealer herds, and the like. And what we want here is full compliance. Well, we're going to ensure there's full compliance with the biosecurity requirements for all these, and that, say, if any of these herds are anyone that's operating one of these herds and they've other herds, that any restrictions that apply to one will apply to them all. Now, the one thing about the controlled finishing units, I would say, is that they are subject to additional biosecurity requirements. And what we have seen is that there's limited spillover into the local neighborhood from these through whole genome sequencing. But that, again, that's no reason for complacency. We do need to ensure that the biosecurity requirements here are fully enforced. Now, the next item here, again, is applying to herds of 80 cows or more with major breakdowns, breakdowns. Like what we said earlier before, 5% or more of the cohort involved. And these animals, the cows, will be restricted from moving to other herds for a period of 2 years after the removal of the last reactors. These animals can go direct to slaughter, or they can go to a controlled finishing units, but they may not go onto the open market for that period of 2 years. The reason of the length of 2 years is that the risk of these animals breaking down, becoming reactors, falls off significantly after 2 years. It doesn't go away, but it falls off significantly. So that's why we're putting this hold. And this hold is specific to the animals in the infected cohorts, the cows. Animals, younger age groups, are free to be traded as they always were traded, but this is specific to cows. We'll be encouraging safer purchases, encouraging people to buy from herds of an equal or a better risk category status, and so that people are make informed decisions when they go buying. We're addressing the issue of calves. We are aware that calves being restricted brings an awful lot more additional work at a time of year when people are stretched already. So we have a policy in place where people have an existing arrangement for someone buying calves, that the purchaser can continue to purchase those calves, but they need to have 2 clear tests. One of those they will be paying for one of those tests. It'll count as their annual herd test, and the other test the Department of Agriculture will be paying for. We do recognise that the restriction on the cows is the 2-year window is putting additional it is creating some difficulty. So we are agreed with the marts to hold special sales of culled cows from restricted holdings, and this is already happening for some online sales, as the animals are but they can only go to controlled finishing units. So that's essentially what I have to say here. But I'd say, as you say, there could be a few questions lined up there.
this one is a significant change, obviously, Damien, in terms of at farm level
Yeah.
and how movements happen and what can move and what can't and where they can go. Maybe you mentioned it there.
Put the slide back up, maybe James, just for a
Yeah,
second.
and
Yeah, if
I'll,
just
you don't
maybe
mind.
walk
Yeah.
us through it because I'd say this is the one. And just from maybe firstly from a time frame point of view, Damien, we haven't maybe mentioned it. When are these changes kicking in?
um, we're, we're the programming for these is ongoing at the moment, and we'd be hoping to be kicking in. The the target date is the 1st of April, and rather than and we hope the plan is that they're all going to be introduced together rather than a drib drab effect. So they'll
Okay.
all the 1st of April is the time that we put this in
Okay.
place. Now, just in terms of those animals being retained, we've seen a bit of a merry-go-round of animals going from large breakdown, animals that were in large breakdowns, going off to other herds, and then lo and behold, going down in other herds. And that's what this has been put in here is to address that merry-go-round, because it's facilitate the spread of disease. So that's been put in place to curtail that.
Okay. So we just spend a bit of time on this, Damien, because I think, and we'll keep an eye on the questions too, James, just to get clarity on this. So the
Mhm.
first bit of clarity is you're looking at a projected timeline of about early April to get these
Yeah,
things and trying to move the whole system in one go, right? So
yeah.
first point is larger breeding herds. So your larger dairy herds, 80 plus, with a major, and just go through this and slowly, maybe that with a major breakdown. So
Yeah.
like a significant breakdown.
Yeah, it's the same criteria as we had for the gift testing.
Yeah. So
5%
yeah.
or 10, whichever is the lesser.
So your typical 100 cow herd that has 6 reactors or whatever it is, large breakdown, maybe a second breakdown. The
Yeah,
point here is that the animals in that cohort then will not be allowed to go onto the open market for two
yes,
years.
yes. It's those animals that are not in that cohort will be allowed to go on the market, but those animals within that cohort, and we can identify those cohorts
Okay.
from the testing.
So now you're putting the change here is you're putting it almost, it's moving to a cohort level or almost an animal level rather than a herd level in terms of
Yeah,
how they're dealt with. Right.
yes.
So now there was quite a it caused quite a stir when this was talked about originally and proposed originally, and we were seeing numbers of, decimation of the number of cull cows appearing in marts for sale, etc., etc. To put some sort of scale on, if you took the figures from over even the last couple of years, how many cows in the country would that actually apply to, if you know what I'm trying to say? That is it a
We,
big number or a small number?
we reckon it's between 15 and 20,000.
So it's 15,000 cows to 20,000 cows. So 1% of the cow population. Now it's more than 1% of the cull cow population, but it's still 1% it's still
Well,
one,
yeah,
yeah, of the total.
and
Yeah, yeah,
all those cows obviously wouldn't be going for culling. And a lot of people
yeah, yeah.
after a breakdown are probably short of cows, and they they, they probably need to hold on to cows rather than cull
Okay.
them.
So this basically means that if I'm in a situation where I'm down after being down for maybe three or a couple of tests, lost the right number of cows, I get clear. I'm now not free to trade my cull cows so I can't go clear on a Tuesday and head to the mart on a Friday with my culls.
No, no, not well, unless it's a special sale for cull cows into controls finishing units. But
Okay, 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 okay. So that's the change. And the rationale for that, just to be clear, the rationale for that is, and is there data there on that, Damien, just to push you on it, maybe that the proportion of those type of cows that do contribute to further breakdowns on other herds, it's the residual infection within that
yeah,
group is the
yeah,
problem.
it's residual infection within those, and like we've several instances where we see this going on, where we can through tracebacks we can see where they came from, and I'm not going to give you a figure now, an exact figure here and now, but
But it's significant,
it
yeah.
is significant. It's something that our staff in the field regularly see.
Okay. And it's just look at
It,
it's
it,
something that's interesting. Sorry, James, it's interesting to me
mm,
anyway. Like we talked about this last year at the dairy conference, and we asked the question, you know, how many farms had requested information on the TB status of the herd that they purchase if in their last purchase. 93% of farms hadn't inquired about TB.
Yeah. Like we, what we're probably doing here is in in Australia and New Zealand, you've got risk-based trading and a different culture of trading. Like essentially what we're trying to do here is to stop the high risk animals going onto the market.
Okay.
And this is we feel this is proportionate in the numbers that we're talking about here and in the numbers that's involved. It's we consider it a
mm.
proportionate response because at the end of the day, if they are moved into another herd and another herd bring down another herd, um, like that's adding to the expense of all of this.
Okay.
It's
But
really a
maybe
protection piece, Damien.
Yes.
You're protecting other herds, other
Yeah.
regions,
Yeah.
and that's the basis of this. There's a lot of questions coming in on this. Joe, I just see one there. I was
sorry. Yeah.
restricted herd in 2025. I had a second clear test 2 weeks ago. Will these rules be applied to my herd retrospectively? So,
There isn't going to be retrospective application of the rules. The rules will apply from April on, so it's not going to be applied
So
retrospectively.
so from
so it's herds.
breakdowns from April on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's herds that have tested after the 1st of April and have
yeah,
breakdowns, Damien,
yeah,
just to be
yeah. It's
clear
not
on that
going
one.
to, well, to be clear, it's not going to be applied retrospectively.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's
Uh,
it's good clarity.
will there be any restriction on calves for these herds?
Once they go clear, once the herd have gone through two clear tests, these calves will be free to be traded.
Okay. There's a number of ones coming in actually there on the calves. Will the movement of unweaned calves from restricted herds be permitted before the 1st of April 2026? There's a few questions
Well,
coming in
that's
there
there
on
that that
calves.
that's permitted already through the policy there of if you've already got somebody to if you're well, you don't necessarily, but if there's somebody now they can only purchase from one infected or one restricted herd at a time. At this stage, that's in place.
So just to be clear on this, right, to bring that to a practical example, James, right?
Yeah.
Your typical, and this is becoming more important maybe as maybe farm to farm trading on beef, dairy calf to beef, buyers wanting to buy direct from farm for their own reasons, right? So I'm in a situation again, my 100 cows, I have 30 or 40 Angus calves that I'm stuck with, let's say, because of TB, and I have somebody that has been buying my calves for the last few years, my calves and my calves only. In the situation that you're talking about, Damien, that there is
There
subject
is
to there's provision to allow those calves to move
yes,
to that rearer's to that um, calf to beef farm,
yes. So
subject to testing after that. Yeah, yeah.
subject to test, two clear tests, and subject to them buying from no other restricted
Okay.
herd.
So the idea there is really that because you do see it a lot now, and it's really positive. I think in the industry, there's good relationships starting to build between you know, dairy farmers doing a good job with their calves, and then you've got the calf to beef guy that wants to buy them. If you have a situation where there's a TB restriction, that can upset that could upset the relationship or put it on hold for a
Yeah,
year. What's going to happen here is what what would happen here is that relationship could be maintained or
yeah,
continued, which would
yeah,
help to take the pressure off the dairy farm, but also help continuity for the calf to beef guy.
yeah, yeah. Like this was something we were very conscious of and was brought to our attention very clearly about the issue of calves, and we do fully understand that it it creates a lot of additional angst at a time of year
Mm.
when people are already under pressure.
Yeah, but just to double down on it, James, and we'll leave it. I'll shut up now. But it's not an open
No, this
market
is
provision.
important because there's a lot of questions coming in on
But
that.
it's not an open market provision. It's a
No,
farm to farm provision, and it's
yeah,
one to one relationship kind of thing, which is where, that's where maybe some people are trying to go anyway.
Mm.
Okay. Okay.
Does animals less than 18 months old not apply to the 2-year rule for movement?
Not it's the exposed cohort in that. Now, if the exposed cohort is in another group, possibly, but for the most part, this applies to cows. These big breakdowns are in cow groups rather than young cattle.
Okay. There's one obviously, and there's a few questions coming in on it. Contract rearing. What does this look like in terms of the movement of animals to and from a contract rearing enterprise?
Yeah. Um, all animals returning home from a contract rearing enterprise have to have a pre-movement test, a 30-day pre-movement test going home. And if there's more than one herd feeding into a contract and rearing enterprise, they need to be pre-movement tested going in, the calves, unless they're under 42 days of age. There's no
Okay.
requirement for a test for an animal less than 42 days of age.
So it's testing in and testing out.
If there's more than one herd going in, yes, yes, in terms of calves or heifers going home, yes.
Maybe Joe, do you have a comment on that in terms of the implications and maybe advice for people that are implementing contract rearing just around best practice?
Sorry, James, there's three other questions there.
Just around contract rearing and maybe best practice, Joe, and it's obviously an important one, and it's important for the farmers involved in terms of it's part of their system.
Yeah.
Damien's outlined there in terms of the testing rules around that, but
Well, the
w-
testing rules become the testing rules are there, and they reflect, I suppose, Damien, don't it? It's the risk, isn't it?
It's the risk, yeah.
It's about the risk, really. So it's
Yeah,
similar, maybe, James, to what we're thinking here in terms of what's been discussed there around the calves, 1-to-1 on the calves, 1-to-1 on the heifers as well. Now, I'm not telling anyone what to do, but it's about, I think we have to remember here, it's everybody's own, it's their own business, their own business to make their own decisions around what risk they want to tolerate. But I suppose the testing regime reflects the relative risk of
the-
where you're putting them.
yeah.
So if you're in a situation where you're willing to accept the risk of mixing your own stock with multiple herds in a contract rearing situation, the rules are reflecting the need. Rules are
Yeah,
reflecting the need to deal with that by more stringent testing.
yeah.
So
Like
that's a person's individual choice after that. I can't tell people what to do, or don't want to tell people what to do. So, but if you have a situation where you're willing to accept that risk, you also have to accept the more stringent testing as part of that.
yeah, like why this is coming in place is that we've seen several instances where animals contract reared carry an infection home with them and introduce an infection to a herd that if it wasn't if it was cut off at the pass before they got back from the contract rearing enterprise, it the original herd wouldn't have been infected. Like as you've said there, like as the number of herds in going into that increases, like that's a thing that's been well established by in UC our colleagues in UCD. Like the greater the number of connections of herds, the greater the risk. And like we've seen instances of up to 18 herds feeding into one contract rearer, and those 18 herds, the TB history in some of those wasn't great. So like that is a high risk that's a high risk pursuit, so it is, and we're not going to be underwriting it.
Okay. And just a
and
question that's come in there too.
yeah,
Sorry, James, is flying herds and herds that are buying cows to recycle, buying recycled
Yeah,
cows and flying herds. I'm sure the risks there must be
yeah,
pushing to the
like
wrong side as well.
yeah, like to be honest, now we very much had those flying herds in mind with this restricting high risk cohorts. Because it's one thing for someone to go out and to sell an animal as a cull with the view to thinking it was going to be culled, but it's another thing for it to be bought to be milked on, and and maybe even put in calf again. And this this will be a particular concern to us, and we're certainly trying to reduce the risk of that. If someone is going to be engaging in that in that kind of endeavor, we'll be at least there'll be less risky animals being purchased.
Available. Yeah, there's lower risk animals on the market. Just maybe, James, did we cover that's the case of those herds, the high risk
The
cohorts that
the
have had a
the the,
breakdown. It's
the pre-movement stuff. There's a few
that's
questions, Joe,
yeah,
coming in
that's
on
exactly.
the pre-movement testing, Damien. Will you just maybe walk us through that at a practical herd level? How does that look as we go forward?
This is for
Yeah,
clear herds, James, is it?
This is for clear herds,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
pre-movement testing.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
How does that look?
yeah. Pre-movement test for dairy cows. All dairy cows will require a 30-day pre-movement test um, to be moved to another breeding herd. And so and that as I say, the 30-day pre-movement also applies to the contract rearing as we discussed there. So that's that's the thing. I suppose that's it in a nutshell. What else do you it's that's it in a nutshell, that we dairy cows will need a 30-day pre-movement test to move to another breeding herd.
Okay. Yep. There's a number of questions coming in there, actually. There's a few questions. Maybe I'll come to you, Joe.
Just
Um,
just that one,
Go on, yeah.
just to clarify that one, James, before, can a restricted herd sell calves to a number of other herds or just one herd?
As of now, one herd. We're exploring. Hold on now. I think the
So
question is, can they sell them to several herds?
yeah,
They can, if each of those several herds takes
only
on
buys from one.
just buys from the one.
Okay. So you can't be mixing herds. You can't
No.
be mixing calves from multiple sources with TB. But if you're a large scale, let's say you're a large scale herd, 400 or 500 cows, you could have 3 people buying your calves, but
Yes.
they can only buy from you.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they do have to take on the risk and take
Of the
on the two
testing.
clear tests.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are some biosecurity arrangements around that as well, about where they're going to rear those animals, and that has to be
Sure.
controlled as well.
Sure. And just another question, maybe these are all good examples, maybe for clarification. A group of 50 in-calf heifers managed as a group. So I 50 in-calf heifers, 5 of them or 6 of them go down with TB, and that's a cohort, that
Yeah.
they're. So I had planned to sell this batch. Can the rest of them not be sold on the open market now for 2 years? So the basic question is, there's TB in a cohort of in-calf heifers. Does the same apply in that situation?
Depends on the number depends on the number of cows in the herd.
In the group, say, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's 10 or 15% of them have down with TB.
Um, that's one now. That's the infected cohort.
Yeah.
That one now could be between the lines, that we'd want to. That's one for the case by case that we need to look
Okay.
into the detail
So
of it.
what you have there is you have a mix between the age profile and you
Yeah.
have the cohort size. So
Yeah.
it's a good question. I take it's a genuine question being
Oh,
asked.
I've no doubt about it, but
Absolutely. So we can take that one. It's one to think about, Damien, isn't it?
it is.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the broad strokes don't cover it.
yeah.
We're gonna go over this one more time as well, Joe, just for clarity. If in 6 months or more from an annual test, I must test pre-movement to the mark within the 30-day pre-movement test. Is that required from now, or when is that occurring?
It's current from the 1st of April.
Yeah.
And look at this will be well flagged when these come in. It'll be well announced. So
Okay.
I'd suggest people follow the farm and media closely on this, because it will be well flagged when it does come in.
Okay. And just quickly, maybe as well, and so I know we're jumping around at the questions, James, but and maybe we'll deal with it now when I do see it. Is there any change in the testing protocol, Damien, if a neighbouring farm or a contiguous farm goes down? Is there any change to the plan there?
The contiguous program continues as is.
Okay. Okay.
That's 6 monthly intervals.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe come to you, Joe, and we'll come back to Damien. Eh, there's a number of questions in there around breeding for TB resistance,
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
I see that there as well in Damien's outline of the TB action plan. Like we're hearing a lot more about it.
yeah,
Um, in simple terms, is this something dairy farmers should be looking at now, Joe? It's in there. It's within the index. Um, and how do they fit it into maybe their everyday breeding decisions? A lot of people on the call are going to be going about picking their bulls for the upcoming breeding season. Um, we just
yeah.
walk us through what's available there to farmers if they're not are not aware of it.
Well, the TB numbers are there per bull now, James. Like in all of these things, like TB is a sorry, breeding value for TB, it's a tool in the box, isn't it? Really, you're not going to breed for a high TB resistance and expect zero TB, maybe particularly if there's a big challenge in the region. But will do is tilt the balance maybe in your favor slightly as to what animals are resistant or not. So I think the numbers on it, and the proofs and the data used for them bulls are used from, daughters of bulls where there has been, the data is used from herds where there is exposure to a TB outbreak. So it's taken the population at hand, if you like, is the cows that are in herds that have an outbreak, for example. So on average, I think based on the black and whites, I think it's about 7.8 or about 8% of in those reactor herds, let's say, the average bull has about 8% of their progeny as reactors, right? So 8% is kind of where the average is at. Some bulls will have progeny as low as 3 or 4% reactors, and some bulls would be up at 30%, right? Now,
Mm.
the numbers might jump up and down a bit across the year, and there'll always be cases where people say, "Well, I had bulls that had high levels for TB or sorry, good resistance for TB, and they still got TB." That will
yeah,
happen, but at a population level, it's to tilt the balance.
yeah,
So instead of using these big outliers, and remember, funny, we need to be careful that we don't reside in the anecdotes, I suppose, but we all have anecdotes how it doesn't work. But I remember maybe 30 years ago or more, a chap sort of saying there has to be something genetic in this TB, because there was clatters of animals in his own herd that went because of, and he had this hunch, and he was at the time probably told that it wasn't, you couldn't breed to change it, but you can breed to change it. So I suppose for the moment, what are we really saying in practical terms? We're going to be looking at if bulls have maybe a figure of 13 or 14%, we're avoiding them, and we're trying to go and
yeah,
use bulls under 8%, maybe closer to 6%. But we also have to keep in mind that we have to make progress on fertility, solids, other health traits. So maybe for the moment, till people get their head around it, avoid the outliers at the upper end,
yeah,
the
Mm.
really bad ones, and get to
Mm.
8% or below. Okay.
There's even a question around them, Joe. Should they be in here? Like, should those animals? I'm just looking as we're considering removing any bull. It's really the bulls, those outliers. Should they be in the AI catalog at all?
Well, the best way for them to get them out of the AI catalog, James, is not to
Is
use
not
them,
to buy the straws.
yeah,
because that's the thing. There's bulls in the catalog that we disagree with about, not enough protein and not enough fertility and not enough of a lot of things, and they're still in the catalog. So it becomes an individual's decision what they want to use. Because somebody might say, "I like that bull, and there hasn't been TB in my area for 30 years. I'm not that worried about the risk." They might want to use those bulls, but I think from my perspective, we should be saying we shouldn't be using outliers at the top end. We could
yeah,
avoid those. There's enough choice otherwise, and it's more like 4 or 5% maybe to start making progress.
yeah,
And that's the kind of simple enough message. And it's, to be fair to ICBF, they've laid it out very well. I think, Damien, that it's
yeah,
quite simple. It's there. It's one figure. Keep an eye on it, I would be saying for sure.
yeah. Like I think the risk of animals with the poor resistance getting TB versus those with the good resistance, it's about there's a the increase in risk is about 25%, a
Yeah,
25% increase in those. So,
about that,
and
yeah. Mm.
There's a lot of questions in there, guys. I'm conscious that we're on for an hour and 10 minutes now, Joe. Is
Will we say 10 minutes, James, or less, and we'll call it quits at that? I'm sure there's
We will.
people
We'll take
wanting
another
to.
few, and I think I'm
Yeah,
looking there. I think there's 70 or 80 questions in. So what we'll maybe try and do is after this, we'll group these questions, and we'll get answers to them.
yeah. Can I
We'll
just
get the
maybe,
answers to
yeah,
them.
there's just one, Damien. I think it's important to ask the question. I think I'm always conscious too of maybe farms that have, and there's a lot of them in the last couple of years, farms that have had a TB outbreak for the first time in a
Yeah,
long time, and they don't know the drill. Unfortunately, we have a lot of farms that are so used to it at this stage, they know how the situation works, right? So there's just a couple of comments in there, maybe to address them. The question of how long it's taken to get animals off the farm after there's a reactor, has that been, can that not be improved? And maybe another question, is we don't hear enough from the department when there's a breakdown. It's very unclear to a person that's down for the first time what it is that they have to do to get a pack of 80 pages, and very hard to find a way through it. Has that been looked at? And I know we've spoken about it a good bit, but I wonder, is there anything that we
yeah,
can say on that?
yeah. Like just on the issue of reactor removals, we've actually reduced from like there's a process to go through in terms of valuations, and there's a bit of to and fro. And what we do know, once evaluation is accepted, the length of time from the average length of time from that until removal is a day and a half. So I think the message I have here really is that that process needs to keep moving. Get the valuer on board, get the valuer in, and both sides and both sides to keep that moving. So that is like once that process does take time. It can take up to 2 weeks, or well, it could take longer, I suppose. But we're generally we're talking between 2 and 3 weeks from disclosure of reactors to removal. Now, but as I say, once the acceptance is in, it's about a day and a half to get them away. In terms of the communications, one thing we are setting up here is a helpline to talk people through the generalities of this. Now, the specifics of a particular case will remain between the local staff and the farmer, but the generalities of what to expect next, this kind of thing, that will be addressed to this telephone helpline.
Okay, so there's a move on that. Okay, okay.
There's a number of questions coming in there around the contract rear, and maybe just for clarity, Damien, what happens if the heifers you got contract rear test positive for TB following the pre-movement test before coming home? Is your herd restricted or contract rearer's herd restricted?
Contract rearer's herd is restricted in the first instance. Now, what may arise is that the contract rearer may not be able to hold on to those, it may not have facilities to milk. And in that instance, the animals, from a welfare point of view, will have to go home. If they go home, the herd that they go home to becomes restricted and will have to have two clear tests as well. So that's how that's addressed.
Okay, that clarifies that one. Have you any more, Joe, there that you want to?
Oh, just a couple of ones around the cost, the idea that or the legitimate question around, will there be additional costs incurred on farms when they can't sell their cows through the marts as cull cows for 2 years? Will there be a system cost? And there's a nitrates question in there as well. I think we have to discuss further, Damien, but there is
Yeah,
the allowance that are people going to end up, because removal of cull cows from a stockery point of view is an important part of managing
yeah.
maybe nitrates. So I think we have to think about that a little bit too. But
Well,
yeah.
there's nothing to stop them being sold to a CFU.
Mhm.
And we have a system in place that I know people may have a concern that a lack of competition in the market, but like the online sales is providing competition in the market. So they're not stuck on that. Like they're free to go direct for slaughter, they're free to go to a CFU. There are
Yeah,
outlets.
there are outlets. Okay. So the difference, yeah. So there are outlets. So they're 100 days from gone anyway, even at finishing. But it's a question on the nitrates. I have to clarify that. Is there an allowance under nitrates for keeping the cohorts for 2 years? As it stands, there's an allowance on nitrates when you are restricted, obviously,
Restricted.
Yeah,
but
there,
beyond that, then yeah,
no, there's not. But like if they're going to, there's an outlet for them to go. They don't have to be stuck with those cows. They can, if there's provision made there if they want to sell them on, to a CFU, they can be sold, but so
yeah.
that nitrates issue shouldn't arise.
And maybe it's not for you, and it's one that we'll have to pick up on. It's just a question around TAMS about a higher stocking rate because of being locked up with TB. Is that something, James, you might know the answer to that one? Can you appeal that on the
Can you
basis?
appeal the decision? Look, I think in fairness, in any appeals case, I think that's a pretty good case to put forward on appealing that decision in terms of it was out of that farmer's control. Joe, there is
Okay,
always force majeure cases there. So
yeah. Just
um, there's
maybe
one on
one.
the
Yeah, go ahead.
neighbour farm going down. What are the protocols? Is there any changes in terms of if your neighbour or a neighbouring farm goes down with TB in terms of what actually happens? I didn't see anything in terms of any changes with that regard, Damien.
Well, the contiguous program
Yeah.
that has existed continues to exist.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Joe. Yep.
Um, what was I going to say there? There was one I lost. Yeah, the question just maybe, Damien, on the testing and the effect of maybe of, you know, cow health, metabolic status, the
Yes.
underlying pressure on the herd. How do you test interacts with that? I know there's some work underway on that. Maybe we
Yeah.
might just, yeah. So,
Um, we
so
have,
like in the spring, for example, if cows are under metabolic stress in the spring, is the test more or less, or is there a bigger risk of transmission or even
yes.
in the herd if
Well,
immune status is compromised? Yeah.
well, there's a couple of layers on that, and we're
Okay.
trying to get the evidence to. We're looking for evidence to establish this, but our working hypothesis is that animals that are in metabolic stress, negative energy balance, they're going to be more susceptible to infection. They're less likely to react to the test, and they're probably more likely to spread infection.
Okay. Okay. So just maybe come back in a similar vein. There was a good question in
Mm,
there, I think, because there is a bit of frustration. And I know I've heard and dealt with a couple of herds that had this issue that there were these allergic cows sitting in the background,
Yeah,
right, that cause serious problems. Very simple question. Is there any way of identifying an allergic cow when they don't react to either test? Like I've seen cases where there've been maybe cows that passed 4 or 5 skin tests and maybe passed 2 or 3 blood tests and still showed up with TB.
yeah.
How do you find them cows, or what's the recommendation to dig them out?
Very difficult. There's a couple of things we do. Um, the that's one reason that my colleagues would do that detective work I mentioned earlier on, looking back over historic skin readings to see is there any hint of infection in the past. We have a specific blood test that's targeted at those, and in a real bad case, and thankfully we don't see these very often. They actually may display signs of clinical TB, like coughing, snoring, weight loss, those kind of things. Like they're well advanced. They're they're not far from death's doors, I'd say.
Okay, so eventually you get to see a
Yeah,
they'll turn into a clinical case, but it's an investigate. It probably means also, Damien, that the quality of testing all
yeah,
along makes a big difference because if the quality of
huge.
testing is good, you have some better data
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
back on.
It is like that. That whole thing is based on good historic skin readings.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I just maybe, James, I know it's one of the first questions asked, and it's a good point, and maybe just to get Damien's perspective on it. From a New Zealand point of view, like there's herds, our dairy herds would be typically 400 cows plus maybe, and the TB rates are, it's just this question about the R0 rate or
Yeah,
the internal the challenge, let's say, of animal to animal infection on large scale herds in a
yeah.
different jurisdiction. Just a perspective on that, maybe, because are we comparing apples and oranges there when we're talking about
we
the
are we are comparing apples and oranges because the New Zealanders took on this probably from the 1990s, and they've reduced herd levels quite a bit, and through a variety of means. They've gone at blood testing more aggressively than us. They've gone at risk-based trading far more aggressively than us, and they're essentially at this stage the disease the reservoir of infection is in wildlife. I'm probably going to say something controversial here now, but our evidence would suggest that the reservoir of infection in this country is in cattle, and it's spilling over into wildlife and spilling back.
okay.
So, like, the level of TB in the New Zealand cattle population is far less than the level of TB in the Irish cattle population, and we have there's far less spillover. The spillover events is from wildlife into cattle. Like, um, far it's as a proportion, it's far greater than what we have here.
Okay, so that if we're talking about the difference in all those things that we have to take into the long-term effects
Yeah,
of the policy, including a risk-based trading approach.
yeah, yeah,
So if we're happy with if we think there's progress made on New Zealand, we have to look more than just where it's at in terms of scale of heritage, which is a fair
yeah.
point.
It
But it's
is
good.
like
It's
that.
a very good question though as to
It is a very good
why are they
question.
different? Yeah, yeah,
It is a very good question, but like they've aggressively taken on risk-based trading, and we're dipping our toe into the water to it. I heard a guy on the radio there a couple of months ago, from Australia, and he had his I think his criticism of us was pretty withering, to be honest, in terms of our action plan. He didn't think much of it in terms of that it didn't go far enough
on the
on the
trading side.
trading.
But look, I think James, I think we're probably getting towards.
There's a few questions in, Joe, maybe, and just get a comment from Damien on one.
Okay,
And the whole space of vaccination, uh, cattle
Okay.
vaccination, and maybe we might finish on that, Joe, because we are, in fairness, our numbers have held strong, which shows the interest and the need for this
Yeah.
discussion. But just the whole space of vaccination, and how far away are we from animal vaccination, and what would that mean in terms of testing protocols?
Yeah. Um, that's a very good point. And vaccination is the holy grail. Um, and our evidence from the University of Wageningen would show that vaccination would be a game changer. But vaccination, as it currently stands, we can't differentiate between infected and vaccinated cattle. And the research that's ongoing in the UK on this is primarily at this moment in time around developing a test to differentiate between vaccinated and infected cattle. We're we're working with our colleagues in DEFRA and APHA on this. We're going to assist them in some trial work. But that's one aspect of it. We need the test that can differentiate between vaccination and infection, and we don't have it yet. For that, I've been hearing that this is about 10 years away, and I've been hearing that for about 10 years. So I think we can't wait around for a vaccine. The other point about vaccination is that there's considerable trade implications, and not just for live animals, but also from the produce of vaccinated cattle, dairy and beef produce, that um, it wouldn't meet the criteria, the export certification criteria. So that's actually, in a way, that there's a technical problem here, but there's also a trade problem that needs to be addressed. But you need to have a live option for vaccination before you can tackle the trade issue.
okay.
Yep, very good. A number of questions in there in terms of complementing the information, and I think there's lots of people there that maybe actually want to listen back to this, Joe. So this is being recorded.
Yeah,
It will be available, and it'll also be released next Monday, actually, as the Dairy Edge, Teagasc Dairy Edge podcast
yeah,
as well. So you'll be fit to capture it there.
yeah.
Joe, I'm gonna leave Damon and yourself with one comment, and I'm gonna close. People will soon need to head to bed.
Um, Look, I just think, just first of all, thanks, Damien, for coming on. I mean, we said we'd have you out in 45 minutes, but we couldn't answer 50 questions in 45 minutes. And I think the engagement has been really good. And I think it's really positive to have the action plan in place. One thing for me, just looking at this from a number of over a number of years, the acceptance that when there's a lump on a cow, that the cow has TB, that's the big thing for me. And also the acceptance that if there's a bit of TB showing up in a herd, it's likely that there's more in the background, and we have to be very diligent on the testing, and we have to be aggressive on the bloods. I said it to you, Damien, a couple of years ago. I think I'm not changing my mind on it, that the severity of the number of animals lost is a lesser problem than the duration of the breakdown.
Yeah.
Right. I think if we end up in situations where we second guess on ones that might be there and we'll get her the next time and all that kind of stuff, we're going to set ourselves up for longer term breakdowns. So I think the key is to, if there is tracks of it in the on the skin test, we just have to face up to that. We have to accept it, and we have to get on with putting the good testing regime in place. And when it comes to blood testing and that, I think we have to be aggressively chasing that. And then the other thing is, one final point, James, for me, is that it is, and I can see completely that it's just not the done thing, but 92% of farmers we asked didn't ask for any TB history when buying stock. I think we need to get that we need to reverse that trend. So that's the two things from me. So.
Okay. Damien.
Okay. Firstly, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to so many people, and I want to thank the people for tuning in this evening. I think what we're trying to set about in this plan, and the minister has been keen to do this, is to empower people to make decisions, to take back control, and to and not be controlled by this disease, but to control it. And what we're trying to do here is to empower people and inform people. But there's a responsibility on people to do the right thing, to ask the right questions, to take the right actions, and be demanding of all the deal with, and that includes ourselves in the department. And I think if I'm really heartened by those questions, in fairness, there were some of them tough enough, but I think they're coming from the right place, from people to wanting to do the right thing and wanting to be informed, and that gives me that gives me a lot of hope. And like we're not declaring victory, and we won't be declaring victory anytime soon, because we're not in a position to. But at this point in time, we've stopped it going up. We need to take aggressive action to start to push it down, and this action plan is designed to do that.
Yep. So look, guys, I appreciate that, Damien and Joe. In terms of we're on there now an hour and a half, a lot of discussion, a lot of interaction. Over 400 attendees on tonight's webinar. So look, at firstly, I want to thank yourself, Damien, from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, and my own colleague Joe Patton from Teagasc. You clearly outlined the changes of the new TB action plan, and I suppose what they mean for dairy farmers going forward. So look, I want to thank then everybody that joined, as I say, submitted questions. The recording will be available both in podcast format and also in terms of the webinar. We will have a look at all these questions, and if we feel there's questions maybe that didn't get answered, we'll have a look at them and make those available and discuss with yourself, Damien, make those answers available to people. So look, at finally, I just want to wish our listeners well for the calving season coming ahead, and thank the two guys again. So look, thanks everybody for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Thanks. Good night.